I guess welcome to all my fellow panelists. Uh, uh, I guess the last but not the least session that we have is really on digital and tech. Uh, I guess as just leaving what Amit talked about in terms of the real focus on healthcare, right? Taking a cue from there, I guess in my personal view, healthcare and tech is today not interdependent but interlinked. So I guess tech and digital has a huge role to play as the government of India kind of rolls this significant initiatives around healthcare. Well, first I would like to invite and welcome my panelist. Meghna, if you go to the next slide, please. Uh, yeah, thank you. So I guess we really have a fantastic panel in front of you, and it's obviously industry leaders and experts in not only in the tech world but in the tax and the corporate world as well. First of all, a warm welcome to Sanjay Puria. Sanjay, it's great to have you at this group CFO of WNS, SEC listed company, and significant experience in the tech industry. Sanjay, welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Sanjay. Well, and then I also welcome K. Balasubramaniam, known as fondly Bala in several of us. Bala leads the corporate tax and the global tax for Wipro. And welcome, Bala, to this panel.
Thank you, Raja. Thanks for the opportunity, and it's a pleasure speaking to all of you.
Thanks, Bala. After that, we've got Sanjay Jain. Sanjay Jain is the partner and MD of Bharat Innovation Fund. Sanjay has played a significant role in deep tech and innovation, and have been doing this work for several years now. So a warm welcome to you, Sanjay, to this panel.
A pleasure to be here, Raja.
Thank you. And of course, we've also got Karthik Rao. Karthik, of course, spent many years in the consulting industry, but now heads APAC tax of one of the leading giants in the tech world, which is Accenture. Again, it'll be a delightful pleasure to have you talk about the impact of tech industry. Welcome, Karthik. I think Karthik's on mute.
Sorry about that, Raja. Yeah.
Not at all.
No, thank you for having me, and I'm very happy to be part of this esteemed panel. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And of course, I've got my colleagues, which is Fatima. Fatima is a partner with Grant Thornton and focuses on tech and the tax. Welcome, Fatima, to the panel as well.
Thank you, Raja. Look forward to our discussion.
And finally, Ravinder Reddy. Ravinder is again a partner with the firm and leads our digital practice and works a lot with public sector on the digital agenda. Welcome, Ravi, as well to the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Raja. Good afternoon to all of you. Looking forward to this fruitful discussion, Raja. Thanks.
Great, thank you, everybody. And let's get started. I guess, Meghna, I've just got 2 slides really. So you just got to go to the first slide. Yes, perfect. So great. I guess really, some highlights on the budget of on the tech and digital sector. I think first things first. This was the first digital budget presented, right, by the Honorable Finance Minister in a tablet, possibly made in India. Clearly shows the intent of the government and the nation to really go digital. I guess second, my personal thoughts on this is that what really stood out for me was no change of tax rates, is status quo, which is great for the industry and the sector. So at least there is no surprises, which itself is quite significant. I think the third element of this budget, at least I found, was really a lot of reference to the new age tech, whether it is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and really coming in forth as far as the MCA is concerned in administration of companies, faceless tax assessments, and a lot of that. And I guess that is clearly showing the intent and the execution of the government's agenda on digital. And that is heartening to see. There was one of the 6 pillars, and I think Amit talked about in the previous panel, one of the 6 pillars was innovation and R&D, specific mention in the budget, and an allocation of 50,000 crores have been allocated for that for a period of 5 years, which I feel is quite large. The other 2 aspects which I found pretty synonymous with what India has been kind of doing is on the digital payment side of things, right? Just to give you a sense, is India saw $200 million of digital payment transactions in October 2020 on the UPI platform. So it's clearly it's booming, especially after COVID. And the 2 clear initiatives, one is the fintech hub at the Gift City. There's a lot of impetus being given to the Gift City. And the second is 1,500 crores for a proposed scheme to encourage digital payments. And we will look at in terms of what the scheme is. I'll be pretty curious to know about that. The next is on the National Language Translation Commission. It's internet. India is a large country, so clearly the regional language flavor coming in. So you can really get the power of internet through a wide variety of population in India. There was, of course, a mention of startups, the tax holidays for the eligible startups, the capital gains tax benefits, which have been extended by another year, and the 1% company, right, for the startups, and which can be incorporated by the NRIs. I think from the indirect tax side of things, clearly the focus is being on Atmanirbhar Bharat. So in terms of the mobile phone parts, etc., some of the customs duty have seen increases, and clearly to boost domestic manufacturing. And as I said, what is really stands out for me is no change in the direct tax corporate rates, which gives no surprises to this sector. The last slide, Meghna, if you can. Well, I guess other matters which I thought and we will debate in this panel is, I won't say misses, but I would say that perhaps certain matters which could have been mentioned. At least for me, what I was really counting was on the direct overseas listing. As some of you would remember, the government announced in May 2020 that unicorns and startups can access the overseas capital markets by direct overseas listing. So there was a lot of expectations around that, which is not found a mention so far in the budget. So we will see how the government kind of tackles this aspect. The second is work from home, right? As we move into a digital environment or working from home, remote working, I guess the industry was expecting certain clarifications around the SEZ and workings around that. And I guess the question really is startups, right? Should there be some more incentives given to the startups as we kind of create the job engine, really revive the job growth for the Indian economy? So I think with that, I will straight away get to the questions and perhaps now invite Sanjay. Sanjay, before what we kind of talk about the tech sector, well, there's quite a lot of stuff that the budget has given us. Well, it'd be great to hear from you. What are the 2-3 key things that really stood out for you in the budget? And secondly, give us also a little bit of sense is how the tech industry, in my view, the tech industry has been the most resilient amongst all industries here. And how does it feed into the tech sector? So over to you, Sanjay.
Okay, maybe I'll answer the second part first from the tech sector perspective. So we know that overall COVID did impacted the tech sector, and it was initial stage of March and Q1, right? But as tech sector has been continuously investing in technology and automation and digital transformation, it definitely enabled them to respond to the COVID impact much better and rebound quickly, I'll say, to a great extent. And by now, by quarter 3, you would have seen that a lot of companies in this sector have already either broadly reached or exited the pre-COVID level, right? And they really learned that how to really work into this environment. For us, new sales were all done virtually, specifically in this environment, in this kind of industry. You are so used to travel or meet client, have those face-to-face conversation, but everything was done virtually, including the whole facility tour what we used to provide to the client. The entire hiring, onboarding, training of resources, everything was done virtually, including the client delivery services, the transition, everything was on that model, and in fact, the work from home model, right? And I would say that the government also supported with a lot of like temporary relaxation, waivers, extensions for a lot of regulations, right? But when we meet today the client, I would say two important needs are always being discussed. One is the cost reduction, and second is the digital transformation. We have seen earlier clients were actually progressing on the digital journey, but the COVID actually forced them to reprioritize their entire investment, and digital transformation became their one of the top priority, right? And so company like us, how we have been helping this entire digital transformation. It's all about accelerating automation to drive efficiencies, providing superior customer experience across channels, leveraging artificial intelligence to redesign and reimagine complex processes, and driving innovation using new and disruptive technologies. And one of the other things which has come up in the sector is, when you're managing this disruption, that we all need to now rethink about the whole core operating model. Now, whether work from home, hybrid model is going to be the new norm, which all we have been already moving in that direction, or already have done that, right? The new commercial models, like it's going to be more outcome-based, managing business variability, that's going to be one of the very key things. So I would say, from a tech sector perspective, it's just the beginning. And, the huge opportunity lies ahead. Tech and tech-led BPM services are poised to grow. And due to the whole this ongoing digital transformation shift, and there will be more need partners like WNS or a lot of tech companies where the client will be looking forward to embark to this journey. Now, your first part on the how I would see from an overall budget perspective, and what are I would pick it up. First of all, I think this budget has been very positive and very bold. We know that the Indian economy had contracted after years of continuous growth, and the economy needed a significant impetus to get back on the growth plan, right? And I believe this budget will lay a very concrete foundation for the future growth, as there has been a huge amount of focus on capital expenditure, in infra, which is like roads, ports, airports, railway, power, agriculture, healthcare, technology and innovation, the whole digital India concept, and education, right? So I believe there will be a multiple effect on the economy, which will lead to a employment generation, rural development. There will be a lot of growth for the associated industries and overall boost to the economy. And the good thing is that the whole story of Make in India or Vocal for Local or Atmanirbhar Bharat is still intact, right? And the other remarkable thing, what I found, that this expenditure is not being financed by increase in tax rates or the capital gain tax rates or inheritance tax, which you all were fearing, right? That there will be a whole increase in this tax rates to fund this entire stuff. So I think the government has planned to finance the expenditure from borrowings and disinvestment proceeds. But one of the very important point I would pick up is the whole infra spend and the rural development, at least from a tech sector perspective, because I believe the impact of that is going to be that more work can be taken to the tier 2, especially in the work from home scenario, because when we started this journey, we know that the power outages or the internet connectivities, all those are still a real problem in hand, which need to be solved. And with this development and progress, I'm sure this will help to solve some of those stuff. Also, to really tap the talent which are into those geography over there, maybe around women, gig economies, retired professionals. So all those things is going to definitely help in the employment generation as well as from a tech industry perspective. One of the other thing what the finance minister mentioned was, she has earmarked the 3,000 crore, and realignment of that existing scheme of that national apprenticeship training scheme, for providing post-education apprenticeship training of graduates or maybe diploma holders in engineering. I think this is going to also help to reboost this entire the talent what this industry is looking for. I believe one of the things which Raja definitely you touched upon, but definitely it would have been a great help was definitely on the work from home, the clarification, right? Which includes the whole special economic zone, eligibility of tax holidays, or maybe the reimbursement in enabling work from home, whether it will be treated as a perquisite, no, it will not be treated as a perquisite, or maybe the tax deductible work from home allowance, similar to like what we had transport allowance or the other expenditure now incurred by employees to purchase the necessary infrastructure, because those are the things which is still very important when the whole new norm and the new models are erupting. But I'm sure the Ministry of Commerce and Industry will soon come up with either some procedural or operational clarification to enable this. But we'll have to wait and watch for that.
No, perfect, Sanjay. Absolutely. I guess you clearly mentioned it. It's a bold budget, and I guess from an economic perspective, right, money getting raised to fund capex, which is clearly making sense, right? But if I'm come to Bala now, right? Bala, just a very commonsensical stuff here. Budget is end of the day, business plan, right? And just specifically now on the tech sector, right? Tech sector has done really, really well, right? Means there's been so much of growth that the sector has seen. But in your view, if you were to pick up a couple of hits, right, which really stood out for you for the sector or even the budget, and maybe certain misses. Obviously, Sanjay talked about the SEZ part, but it'll be great to hear from you also around uh, the misses, or maybe what are the factors that the sector needs a little bit more push from the government now.
Yeah, thanks, Raja. I think it's a very valid question. We ask ourselves in every budget whether there is anything for the tech sector. And one of the notable things that you would see, in the last few years, maybe 5 years, 6 years, or even more, is I think the government has not done anything for the tech sector. Of course, they have concentrated on startups, and a lot of incentives have been rolled out, etc. But for the larger players, they have not been enough on the tech sector. But I think rightly so, right? Because this sector has been the focus of the government right from 1991. So I think the government has handheld this industry for a very, very long time, right? About maybe even 2.5 decades, right from the STPI policy, the EOU, then came the SEZs. I think this industry has been the darling of the government, successive governments, right from 1991. And we have had enough from the government, and we are in a reasonable position at this point in time. So to expect more from the government when there is lot to be done on other sectors, right? And today, what was the focus? The focus was on healthcare, the focus was on infrastructure, and we know there's lot going on agriculture, right? In terms of the farmer issues, etc., etc. So the government had lot going on the other side, and they had enough to do on their plate. So this sector has to concentrate. So for this sector to expect some push from the government, I think that will be a little far-fetched expectation. We are not going to get anything. And I don't think the sector needs anything at this point in time. All it needs is, leave it alone. Don't put more and more confusion in terms of the changes that you want to make. We will talk about other issues like significance, business presence, etc., etc. I think those are the items there we have to work with the government for clarity. From an incentive perspective, I think this sector has lived its life from an incentive side. We should not expect more from the government. But of course, the government has made right noises, like Sanjay put it. The rural infrastructure is being looked at, and that's in the long run is going to help the sector to reach out to tier 2 cities and help our employees work from anywhere, kind of a model that we are all embarking on. And that will automatically bring the cost optimization that is required for this industry, right? And so if the ecosystem is good, I think the tech sector is also going to be taken care. But if you are asking anything specific for the tech sector, I think we were not expecting anything big, and rightly so.
Thanks, Bala. I think very succinctly put that the tech sector doesn't need it. It is doing well. The government has supported. But I guess, Sanjay made that point. I absolutely resonates with me, the rural infrastructure, right? It maybe at the heart, it's really the talent which matters. And talent also needs not just the infrastructure, but the digital infrastructure, right? How do you make sure that tier 2, tier 3 cities people can work with? So I guess it's a pretty important aspect of the sector. Now coming to Karthik. Karthik, you've kind of, traveled consulting. Now, of course, you lead tax for an MNC like Accenture. Uh, just now specifically on the sector. Now the sector has seen lots of tax issues and litigations. It's not been, while Bala said that we've got the support, but as I understand, there are a lot of litigations as well. I just want to get your take in one is, are there 2-3 specific issues that the sector still faces? And I know the budget also talked a lot about faceless assessments and using all of that. Do you see directionally some shift happening in litigations, assessments, and things like that?
So that's a great question, Raja. And I think, you're right that, as an MNC, and I'm sure, as any company, tax certainty is certainly, one of the most important, elements that we all strive for. And the kind of litigation that the industry has seen, be it on transfer pricing or sometimes even on, tax holiday related incentives and things like that has certainly put a fair bit of pressure, and also sort of has been like the hanging sword of sorts, that exists today. So it was good to see that the government, continues to be committed to sort of taking steps to see how this litigation and this kind of litigation can be sort of curtailed. I think as compared to previous budgets, at least I felt that there were some much more concrete announcements and concrete steps taken in this budget to try and at least correct the situation. For me, I think the announcement that the entire advance ruling process is sort of going to be revamped, and it's going to be you're going to see advance rulings in a new avatar. I think that that was a pretty important and a significant move, because it at least somewhere to my mind shows that the government has now tried fixing that old system, and it seems like they've realized that it's not working, and therefore something dramatically different needs to be done. So I think that was a pretty positive step, and hopefully with a new advanced ruling forum, there will be an opportunity for taxpayers to sort of get certainty. I think on the transfer pricing side, APAs have anyways been very successful in the Indian context. The Indian government's track record on signing APAs has been far better than most other countries. So now I think on the non-transfer pricing side, it will be good to see how they can correct the situation with advanced rulings as well. And the other big shift, which was very interesting, and again, it's not restricted to the tech sector, but a larger issue is the whole intent to take tribunals faceless. Now, again, while it's a good statement and a good intent, I think right now we are still to see the results of how faceless appeals at the commissioner appeals level and all of that will sort of go through, and how effectively that system works. So while I think it's a good positive step, I sometimes I just wonder whether this step of taking tribunals faceless and making it virtual could have been sort of maybe delayed once we've learned from some of the things with the faceless appeals at the commissioner appeals level. But otherwise, I think from an intent standpoint and from a policy standpoint, it's sort of headed in the right direction. I think even the proposal to reduce the time limit for reassessments, that again is very positive, taking it down from 6 years to 3 years. It certainly reduces the element of uncertainty to a large extent. So these are all, I think, good steps, and at least it seems to be an acknowledgement that the government knows that this is a problem area and it needs to be fixed.
Great, thanks, Karthik. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the coffin. Which certainty is important, right? Means you people need that certainty, and there's clearly intent of really reducing complexities and litigations. Coming to Fatima now, I think Fatima, you've obviously handle a lot of things around transfer pricing, and tech has seen a lot of these litigations. Great to hear from you. One, do you see any impact of the budget really on that? Because MNCs like Accenture and all of that really have significant transfer pricing arrangements. Of course, Indian companies too. So it'll be great to hear from your perspective anything around transfer pricing.
Right. Thanks, Raja. And Karthik did really touch upon quite a few points there, but yeah, I'll add on some very specific points which I had made a note of. So one is just to put this whole thing in context. The industry is $191 billion expected 2020 as of the last published numbers, and 77% of that is exports, right? So really managing the cross-border and the transfer pricing regulation is really goes to the heart of ease of doing business for the tech sector, right? And really I mean, it has a variety of impact, right? And when you talk about transactions, tax certainty, like Karthik mentioned, goes to the heart of it. And there is a lot of experience around this. We see that in a number of cases, in scores and hundreds, if not thousands of cases, the way the assessments, the audits, the litigation moves is pretty standardized by now, right? Whatever is done at the audit stage moves to the next level and to the tribunal, and then the whole thing just keeps on getting stretched without much relief at the intermittent stages. So managing this whole thing with simplification and self-governance would really, really encourage and take away all these barriers to, managing the tax. So from the simplification and self-governance point of view, one of the things which government can look at is just like how thresholds are being increased for transfer pricing compliance as well. The thresholds can be increased from the current 1 crore to a much higher number, which would be reflective of the current economic, situation, in line with all the other thresholds which are being increased as well. The other thing is when we talk about simplification, digitization, faceless, the rules of the game also need to change. If you're going to take the whole thing which is happening manually right now, digital, it's not going to really create a lot of difference in terms of value add or simplification to the companies, right? So there again, doing a risk-based assessment rather than, auditing each and every case and ending up adjusting most of the cases, right? That's the scenario right now. So this needs to again move to a risk-based, value-based assessment. Then another suggestion I had, or rather something I look forward to, is integration of the certification and the transfer pricing documentation and making it electronic. Right now, the documentation is offline. Now, when the TP audit timeline is being reduced, that is one of the proposals to reduce the audit timeline. So to do that, the officers also need to go up the value chain, do things faster. Now, if they're going to run after companies to ask them to submit documentation and all of that, it just adds. And then there'll be less time for them to finish the audit. So maybe this would be a good step, electronic transfer pricing documentation in order to make the audit effective and faster. The other thing is, there is a first level of appeal. Now, as Karthik mentioned, there's humongous litigation. India is one of the top 3 still in transfer pricing litigation, right? So there, the first level of appeal is called the dispute resolution panel, which is an alternative to commissioner appeals, right? Now, that particular level has become synonymous to no relief or minimal relief, very, very ineffective for a variety of reasons. Now, government, several representations are made to make this effective, at least bring in some level of negotiation similar to APA at this level, to get some kind of relief there. Otherwise, it's simply a pass through to the now faceless tribunal, right? So how do you expect relief there? I think I want to talk a little bit more about, the moving of traffic from courts, the litigation traffic from courts to APA, and a lot of traffic from APA to safe harbor, right? Now, in APA, there have been several resolutions, several high-value resolutions, and especially for tech sector, I think all of us on this table have good experience with the APA, that more or less the APA team understands the tech sector very well. And they also have a broad reference range, irrespective of what the company is exactly doing, like the niche. They do have their reference ranges and they work within that, right? And the experience is also that when you compare your experience in a unilateral APA, that is just with the Indian government, versus a bilateral APA, which is, for example, if you're looking at India servicing a US-based parent, then it becomes a bilateral, that is between India and US tax authorities, right? That experience is far more effective or beneficial to the taxpayer because two governments are negotiating, it results in a moderated rate. So one would look forward to the fact that the experience in bilateral APAs is translated to a safe harbor level. Right now, if you look at the safe harbor margins, it is 17% expectation for turnover less than 100 and 18% for turnover less than 200. So what one can look forward to is that if a lot can be done under the safe harbor regime by removing all these turnover thresholds and bringing in those moderated percentages to safe harbor, right? So a lot of litigation can be moved from courts and APAs to safe harbor, which is based on self-declaration.
Sure.
Right? So I think largely, Raja, that would cover broad takeaway.
No, perfect. I think lots of recommendations coming from your side to reduce litigations. I'm sure, I think, but the message is clearly simplification, right? We definitely want litigations to reduce. You had lots of recommendation on safe harbor as well. Moving gears now, I guess the innovation ecosystem, and I guess no better than to talk about that is Sanjay. Sanjay, you've obviously seen and connected with the innovation system and deep tech for long. And as you invest from Bharat Innovation Fund, you've got a lot of touch points with startups. And just give us a little insight of what this budget really means for you as an investor, number one. And secondly, for entrepreneurs, right? Because it'll be great to also hear from you, what's the real story on ground?
Great. I mean, thanks, Raja, for the opportunity. And I think one of the, and as an investor, we look at spaces where companies are innovating and building innovative products. And the second place we work on is inclusive development. And so those are the two spaces where we invest in. And for both of them, the budget has sort of slightly different views. So when we take a look at the innovation sector, we've seen that in the budget, they put money towards the national
research organization. Yeah.
And in addition to that, they've done, I think, the space and the deep ocean missions as well. And I think this is great from the government perspective. But what they've not done is provide incentives for private companies to spend on research and innovation. That's, I think, one of the pieces which is missing. And I think we need to have that as well, because whatever money the government can put into research, I think private sector can do as much, or perhaps, if the government acts as a catalyst, it can do perhaps even more. So that's something which I think would have been good to see that come in. In the other aspects of it around financial inclusion, I think one of the pillars itself talked about inclusive development, and they followed it up with a lot of things around the gig economy, the informal workers, which is great to see. From a startup perspective, what that does is it's a sort of indication that the government is serious about bringing in benefits and support to this set of folks, and that is something where we expect to see a fair amount of startup activity coming in. One other thing that we noticed in the budget was the fintech hub in IFS City. I think you touched on that earlier, and I think that's a great directionally. It's a great thing. I think the details will have to be seen, but I think it will be good for us to see a lot more happening within India as opposed to having to have funds being set up offshore and whatever all of the other pieces that go with it. So I think that's something which we look forward to sort of seeing the fine print on to understand what's happening there. But that could be a game changer for us. One other point I wanted to highlight was around digital and tech, was that they started out with the sort of symbolism of presenting the budget on a tab. But beyond the symbolism, it seemed like digital has sort of become so ingrained into everything that you don't actually need to mention it separately. And I was just looking at the use of the word portal, and it comes in health, it comes in customs, it comes in GST, and which is so everything is really tech, digital and tech enabled, which I think is a fantastic sort of place to be today, that it actually doesn't deserve a separate space in the budget, but it's just all throughout. And that was great to see. I think the health piece is another important element where you'll have a lot of startups coming around, because while they didn't actually mention that in the budget, the National Health Mission actually has a digital architecture behind it, and that will enable a lot of tech companies and startups to integrate well. And any investment in health actually means a great opportunity for folks to come in and build out there. The same thing is true in education. We talked about the national digital education architecture. And again, that means we'll be seeing a lot more activity in these spaces. So overall, I think for the areas we look at, is very positive. The fact that they didn't change too many parameters is also great, because I think, as Bala mentioned, leave us alone. We'll do give us a good environment which is stable. We'll go and make things happen. And I think that's great for the sector.
Fantastic, Sanjay. I think you mentioned lots of comments, and obviously Bala's comment, leave us alone, let us innovate. But you also touched upon that perhaps you could have seen private sector giving more impetus to have R&D focus. I think government is clearly that the agenda is clear. I think you also touched upon the opportunity for healthcare and health startups and health tech related stuff. Absolutely brilliant point around that. Just one aspect I just want to ask you is your view on, the startup seems to be obviously having issues as well, right, during this pandemic. And there has obviously been the announcement around the one person company that you can form, so ease of doing business. But were you expecting some more, impetus for the startups, perhaps the struggling startups, because there's that job creation angle also there. So were there some misses you felt on the startup side?
So it's hard to define a startup, but it's actually easier to define MSMEs. And I think it might have been worthwhile for the government to look at what they could do more for that sector, because I actually think MSMEs and the startups will be out there to support them, and startups are a part of that ecosystem as well, are very well positioned to be the job engine for the country. And I think as we recover, they will be the backbone of our recovery. And that's something which I think was a bit of a miss, and would have loved to see much more happen out there. And for startups, you're right, it's been a tough year. While I think some of the funded startups have done well, the others have had a really rough year of it. And even in the lending space, I think we've seen a fair amount of, it's just been a terrible year. But I actually prefer to sort of, have this thing where you have very much of clarity on what to do and let the market determine this. And I think from that perspective, I'm actually okay with that. Excellent.
So I think all positive again from the startup side. Now coming to Ravi. Ravi, you obviously has significant experience working with the government. You've seen very closely how the government has transformed the digital initiatives and the smart cities, etc. Your take on Digital India. Now, was this enough done in the budget? Were you expecting some more, or you think it was good?
Thanks, Raja. I completely reflect what Sanjay was saying, that now tech is so ingrained in every aspect of business, governance, administration, that it does not need a special mention or a special kind of a segregation as far as budget lines are concerned. Yeah, just emphasizing on those. while there is not a special mention of the amount that government will spend, or each program or each department will spend on digital initiative, but there is a mandate. There is, in fact, a mandate that each department would at least spend 3% of the annual revenue on digital initiatives, right? Which itself is, so. If you take the entire government budget and do a 3% uptake on that, that's a huge amount. So every department will spend about 3% of their annual budget on digital initiatives. So that's something that's a given, right? But having said that, as I said, I think there's very clear focus on fintech. I think that's already got a very special mention, especially on the digital payments part. I think because that's where they've seen great successes during this pandemic, right? So if you talk about enabling environment, we have Aadhaar as digital identity. We have UPI as a digital payment mechanism. We have BharatNet as a core network infrastructure, providing high bandwidth infrastructure up to the Gram Panchayat level. Then we have Umang app, which basically delivers some 400-500 government services to the citizen through that. So eventually, I think all these enabling parameters, enabling infrastructure components together, becomes a very formidable force as far as government, take on this whole concept is concerned. While having said that, I also strongly believe that since these components are already in place, it will, give opportunity to huge amount of investment from the private sector as far as serving the last mile is concerned. I think that is something, the potential of serving the last mile is yet to be yet to be unleashed. And once that starts becoming a focus for companies, I think private companies themselves will invest a lot of it to leverage that potential. That is one thing. The second thing is a lot of startups. At least I know of about 5 to 6 startups that have in spite of not having capital investments, to have started innovating in these particular aspects of how to serve the unserved, basically how to actually connect the rural India to the mainstream in terms of digital initiatives, in terms of digital aspects, e-commerce, e-governance, etc., etc. So eventually, and I've seen great successes and great, I've seen these companies really become big. In fact, a couple of them are on the way to becoming unicorn shortly, right? So I think it's a formidable force for everybody to leverage, and we're going to see government realizing its potential and doing more, at least as far as legislative issues are concerned, to ease it out more for companies to start investing in this in the last mile connectivity and related initiatives. So these are certain things that I think have come up as thoughts based on this budget. Having said that, I think there have been some misses also. Just, since you mentioned smart cities, I think that's something that I personally have been involved for the last about 5-6 years, and I think that has been I would say that has been a kind of a miss. I'm not sure whether the government is happy with the way the first set of 100 smart cities have taken shape. The kind of successes governments and municipalities and local bodies have seen. I'm not sure whether that's been seen in a very positive light. I think there's been a slight bit of a negative sentiment also around this, a bit of politics around that. But having said that, as I said, the first and believe me when I say this, local bodies and municipalities are the most difficult government bodies to work with. For any transformation, for any kind of a modern initiative to be brought in, right? But in spite of that, I think significant steps were taken. I'm not sure whether all the aims have been achieved, but definitely, the 5-6 steps, that have been achieved should have been leveraged by further enforcing, further investment, further, identification of more cities to be covered under the program. That is what I was expecting to happen, but sadly, I did not see any mention of that. And that's more like a personal interest I have in that subject. I would, because having personally worked on these initiatives, especially on the ITES field for the last several years. I was wanting more action on this particular space, but sadly that has not happened. But hopefully, even if it does not happen through the central government initiatives, I'm sure state governments will back it up with their own initiatives when they do the budget. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, we'll see more action in that particular space.
Great point made, Ravi. I guess smart cities, right? I think we talked about a lot on infrastructure, physical infrastructure. The need for digital infrastructure, right, is also pretty significant. I thought that was possibly, at least I haven't seen the fine print, but the significant focus on digital infrastructure, because as we go through this digital way of working and transactions, right, the digital infra has to really hold up. So I guess now moving gears to certain specific tax items, and maybe I guess I'll come to Bala, to you. There was obviously a mention around goodwill, right? And and feel free, Karthik, Sanjay, to come in as well. What I understand is goodwill is not tax deductible, and it's been specifically clarified. But I just want to get a sense of what does it really mean for the tech sector? There's a lot of M&A. There is significant value that gets paid beyond just the fixed assets and the working capital. So there is a significant premium that comes in. So how do you see that, Bala, from playing for a tax perspective or from a financial reporting perspective?
Yeah, in fact, this is a provision which has caught us all, by surprise, because this is not a very recent, development as far as the judicial pronouncements are concerned, because, the Smith's Securities decision came long back as far as the allowability of goodwill is concerned. But suddenly, I think the government has, chosen to do this. But even when they did it, I think they've done a larger collateral damage in terms of wiping away the entire goodwill, right? So what was being allowed through the judicial, pronouncements was on the goodwill relating to amalgamations, right? But to also deny a goodwill, which is which is like a purchased goodwill, right? When we go out and do M&As, genuine M&As, and we pay a certain price, which is certainly above the book value of the assets. To deny a benefit on the said goodwill, because these are not assets that we buy and sell tomorrow or a year later, right? Because these are all strategic acquisitions that we make, and on strategic acquisitions, when we look at purchase of assets and integrate that with our mainstream business, to deny goodwill, I think it's certainly not the right move. Number one. Number two, now there will be confusion on what is goodwill and what is other intangibles, right? They could
True.
be customer intangibles, they could be real intangibles in terms of IPs that will come over, right? And those are all self generated within the business that we will look at. So now we have to do, from an accounting perspective, of course we do this split between goodwill and intangible, and of course people are all they choose what they choose based on what is amortizable and what is not amortizable from a financial reporting perspective. But at least from a tax perspective, we were not worried whether it is this side or that side of the goodwill or the intangibles. Now we have to be really worried about, and that's going to start the next round of litigations on this particular subject. And that's where I feel, I said, leave us alone, because we have had enough on transfer pricing. We have seen that we have not yet settled, right? It's been so many years on transfer pricing, and we have not seen the light at the end of the tunnel. Now to start off on issues like this, issues like significant business presence, issues like poem has not settled down, we don't know what is going to happen on GAR. Karthik mentioned about reassessment. I have my own doubts on reassessment. Instead of reducing the time limit, she has increased it to 10 years, right? So it's certainly not a certainty that we are looking at, because what was 4 and 6 has now become 3 and 10. Now this is not what we wanted in terms of reopening of concluded assessments, right? If you want to keep assessments open for 50 lakhs for 10 years, is that the certainty that this industry wants, right? So issues like this, I think they should have not, in my view, I think the bureaucracy has had its say on some of these issues. And one or two, not many, but one or two is going to, make a lot of impact, I would say. And we are going through a phase where we are going to do a lot of M&A, right? There's going to be a lot of assets, stressed assets, a
True.
lot of money is there, in certain companies. So we are going to go out and buy. And if we have to, look at issues on, goodwill, that's the last thing that, any business, guy is going to look at. But then it adds to the cost of acquisition, and of course we will tag along and do what is right, from a business case perspective. But it's just hurts.
So fair point, Bala. I think I'll let Karthik come in and
Yeah.
possibly give his views here.
No, I think I completely echo what Bala says on the goodwill point, and just one additional point that sort of struck me as very odd. I mean, even if for whatever reason this provision had to be brought in, ideally it should have been brought in for any goodwill that is generated, after this amendment gets legislated. Now, the way this amendment has been introduced, it actually goes and impacts even past transactions and existing goodwill that has already been created. Now, if you've done a transaction a few years back, with a set of assumptions, and sort of built a business case, a model around it, where you've factored in some of these goodwill-related deductions and amortizations, and suddenly that's taken away. It also impacts the financial viability of acquisitions in a sense. So I think the amendment was certainly surprising, and it's certainly a negative for the sector. But on top of that, to sort of introduce it in a way that it impacts retroactively some of the past acquisitions, I think that hopefully I'm hoping that at least will get corrected.
Raja, you may have to deal with a lot of deferred tax write-offs.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I would completely agree to what Karthik was saying, because this is the last thing what we can have is again having something retrospective, because somewhere, this government started giving some views that, okay, it will not be, but these are some of the things which starts worrying, right, to do the transactions or even the foreign investment, because they just want to move away with this whole stuff, because everyone becomes nervous, right? That today it is looking so great, but tomorrow you just don't know how things completely change, and the business viability or the transaction viability completely goes out of a window, right? So absolutely, and yeah, they have to in fact encourage by, and not to disturb something which was in fact getting quite well settled, right? Somewhere, because it was getting allowed and less litigation was happening. But I think not to disturb some of those stuff. So I think, yeah, this is negative, but I'm sure M&A will continue, because there are a lot of merits beyond the taxation, which is more strategic. So life will move on. But yeah, these are some of the things which definitely should not be like a hurdle or a speed bump, what one would expect.
No, absolutely. I think thanks a lot for these comments, Sanjay, Karthik, and Bala. I think the goodwill definitely is a negative. I also view that, given so much of tech is M&A. By the way, globally, tech is the leader of M&A globally, not just in India. So this is definitely something to watch out for. Sanjay, coming to you, overseas listing, right? You're obviously you access global capital markets. How important was you felt for the direct overseas listing, right? The government actually announced in May 20 that Indian companies can directly access the markets. No mention now here. Some quarters believe that it's a rule, is a change in the corporate laws, RBI, etc. So they can come with a clarification later. But do you think that was an important miss at this point of time for the Indian corporate sector?
Yeah, I think it was something which, since it was announced earlier, I guess expectations were high that something of that sort would come out. And, as a VC investor, we look for exits, and, overseas listings are fairly pretty much what we would, I think, it's one of the best ways for us to exit. So from that perspective, I think it was a miss. We were waiting for it, but, I'm still hopeful that it could come out, and, a subsequent thing may not be in the budget, but could be just part of the regular announcements that they do. So
right. I was also asking Sanjay Puria as well, because
So
Sanjay,
no, I
given,
think
yeah,
sure, Sanjay
yeah,
definitely covered that.
yes,
Because I believe definitely there was a lot of expectations. When we talk about all this technology and mobility and startups and raising definitely capital from the overseas market where the cost of capital is lower, it becomes more sense. And not only that, it increases the company's brand awareness, visibility.
absolutely,
You know. The investor base, what they are looking for, and the significant sectoral expertise, right? We're able to be able to better and accurately value securities, offered by the company. So I think there were a lot of those merits over there, when we look at that particular space. But I'm very hopeful that maybe not in the budget, but later on it will get covered. And I would expect that companies should definitely, in the mid or the long term, should expect this will be there. Because somewhere this discussion started, and the intent is there to really help that. See, we spoke about a lot of around this, startups, and the digital area. See, I think the good thing is that the intent of the government is there, right? And they have made a lot of progressive steps around it. But yes, what we call in India like dil mange more, right? So definitely it's like a need of yesterday. So, we want that, and more aggressive and a faster pace than the pace what they are showing. But yeah, government has its own problem of looking at various sectors and where to push and where not to push. I'm sure it's on the agenda and it will come up. The way they are making progress or changes. So now we can talk about the positive and negatives of faceless assessment. But I think the intent is right that moving towards litigation, and this will take some time because these are some of the reforms and the major changes. Just like what the GST we faced, when it got implemented, it was so implemented poorly. But after like a couple of years, it's still in a much better place than what we were in, right? I'm sure there's a lot of improvement still required. But I think that's what the all intent is all about and having. But yes, the pace is required much faster than the pace that what they're following now.
no, absolutely. I think thanks, Sanjay, for that. We're just coming to the close, really. I just will take maybe just some final quick 10-20 seconds comment from each one of you. Really, if you could just articulate, the budget is done and dusted. Honorable Prime Minister said, which is Atmanirbhar Ka Bharat ka budget is a budget of opportunities, right? And he also, I think, mentioned that lots of mini budgets have happened. So the Big Bang event is now over us. I think one person mentioned to me, I think, which stood out for me is really about execution, right? Budget is a business plan, right? End of the day, it's really executing the plan. Just a quick 10-12 seconds from each one of you. What do you think would be the one top thing that the sector needs to do from an execution perspective? Because as everybody said, right, we don't need a tech separately. Tech is embedded in every business today. So if there is a quick response from each of one of you, execute our sector, the tech sector agenda, what do we really need to do for the sector? So maybe starting with whoever wants to go.
So maybe I'll start,
Sure.
Again, the one definitely like I like the way Bala put, leave us alone. So I think that's a very important stuff what they need to do. But I think other than that, from a tech sector perspective, nothing major, but just to support what are certain things what have been recommended. That's going to be very important. Like this new new model or new norm what we keep on talking about, and the clarity of the work from home. I'm not talking about SEC or something, but there are various other clarity. That is the most important thing as we are moving into that journey, because delaying the whole lot of that stuff is going to again derail this entire model. Because let's take it very clearly, COVID is not over yet, and we don't know what's the uncertainty right in front of us, or maybe something like that. So we have to be at least ready and clear about this entire stuff. So that's where I would just put it across.
Perfect. Sanjay, Jen.
Yeah, so I think from an execution perspective, we'll be looking very closely at our own companies and our own startups in terms of how we can go in and support the informal workers, the gig sector, and the education sectors on these things, because I think that's what will end up building the resilience in the economy that we are looking for. And I think that's something for us to go out and make happen. And I think that we'll be really looking forward to doing that. And of course, getting the enablement from the government to do so.
Perfect. Bala?
No, I think, so I don't want to use the word leave us alone. Uh, I really, did mean it, but then, what I would
Bala, on a
expect
lighter
is,
note, I don't think the tech sector can be ever left alone. It's
I know,
embedded in every
absolutely. That's what
business.
Sanjay said.
Right?
Yeah. So, even
Yeah.
if we want to stay away, I think we can't, they will not let us stay away. But I think what resonates, for me is from a policy and incentive perspective, we are not going to get anything major. But what we expect is certainty. I think we have had enough of litigation. We have had enough of changes. The proposals are also there, the significant business presence, the equalization levy, even the clarifications which they have made, on equalization levy are very cursory, right? The software royalty issue is still lingering in Supreme Court. Tomorrow, the hearing is going to be taken up. We don't still have a clarity on our basic payments, the bread and butter payment that we make to software. Is it so difficult for the government to come out with a clarification? Do you want only the 3 judges in this country to decide on software royalty? So issues like that, we have had enough, waiting time with this government, expecting clarity. I think clarity and certainty is certainly lacking in tax, administration and execution. We if at all, the government wants to do something for this industry, I think from a tax perspective, I would expect they're doing everything else in the ecosystem which will certainly propel this industry. The ecosystem globally is also very good for this particular industry, so we don't have to worry about the industry's prospects. But if you have to nurture it and take it to the next level, the government needs to provide certainty on the tax side.
Thank you, Bala. Karthik?
Yeah, so very quickly, Raja, I think, I completely echo what Bala has said. And, in addition to giving certainty, I think if they continue to work on, easing and simplifying, compliance processes, adopt a more risk-based approach. I think Fatima alluded to that earlier. So rather than, just going through assessments every year, which just puts so much of strain on company and resources. If there's a better way in which these kind of conversations can be handled, and there are lots of experiences, I think, from other countries, where they've sort of experimented and evolved and come up with a good system to sort of do more targeted assessments. So I think in addition to getting certainty, just continue to ease and simplify tax compliance processes. I think that will be that will be a big area to focus on for the government.
Superb. Fatima?
Yeah, so I would echo what's mentioned above by others. Reduce the shadow of litigation. I think just remove it from the IT industry and do more with less. Unlock the potential of safe harbors. Move traffic from court to APA, from APA to safe harbor, and just simplify. I think that's the need of the hour.
Fantastic. Ravi? You're on mute, Ravi.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So I can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So as I said, I won't talk much about taxes, but I would say, I think innovation is the next set of high-tech inventions. Innovations is something that need more incentives. That's my thing. You see, for us, because India as a country is poised for the next big jump, but that will only happen when high-tech, the cutting-edge tech gets super incentives from the government, which I think somewhere that's still not up to the mark compared to other countries. So I think that is something that needs to look at.
Fantastic. I think great points, and really thank you very, very much every one of you for your insights. I think I just close with only one thing to say is, while overall we said leave us alone, but tech is embedded in every business. And I think to just take what Ravi's point is, really the next decade got to be India to be the digital powerhouse of the world, right? That's really the ambition. And to achieve that, my view is really two things needs to happen. I think one is all of you talked about the new way of working. As Sanjay said, the working from home is not just working from home during COVID, but the new way of working. And how does our systems, compliance, tax administration revolve around that? That needs to be considered. I think Bala talked about certainty. Lots of clarifications required. I think the certainty is very, very important for the industry. I think Karthik, you clearly talked about simplification of the systems and the processes of the tax administration. And of course, Sanjay, you talked about, giving the impetus to the startups, and perhaps also look at the overseas listing in the coming months as well, because India needs that capital. And Ravi, you talked about cutting edge technology, right? More needs to get done. And I think the last thing I would say is also perhaps also about talent. Uh, whether it is upskilling our tech uh, people is pretty critical. But I guess with that, thank you, gentlemen, and Fatima for this. And I guess thank you very much for your time.